Ladies and gentlemen, this article will be dedicated to I consider the best chronicler and encyclopedic, what they call knowledge writer of Stephen King's career, the great Bev Vincent from River Charlotte, New Brunswick, one of the greatest writers in Maritime's history. Short stories talking about King's career, different, again, essays, different novellas. Bev Vincent has captured Stephen King many, many ways, and most recently he did the autobiography of King's life, both the adult and the youth edition, some of the best writing you'll ever read, so pick that up at your local store or online. But today, when I say I'm dedicating to Bev, to study Stephen King, which he's done through the years, you have to look at his childhood, and it's quite interesting. Now, we all know Stephen King is probably a top 5 writer in the history of the world, at least. But his early life and education was quite interesting and kind of formed what he would be successful at later. Now, born in the great Maine community of Portland on September 21st, 47, his father, Donald Edwin King, was a traveling vacuum salesman after returning from World War II, was born in Indiana with the surname Pollock, which is very prevalent in New Brunswick and across the East Coast, changing it to King as an adult. King's mother was Nellie Ruth King, near Pillsbury. His parents were married in Scarborough, Maine on July 23rd, 39. They lived with Donald's family in Chicago before moving to Croton-on-Hudson, New York. King's parents returned to Maine towards the end of World War II, living in a modest house in Scarborough. He is of Scotch-Irish descent. Now, when King was 2, his father left the family. His mother raised him and his older brother David by himself, sometimes under great financial strain. They moved from Scarborough and depended on relatives in Chicago, Croton-on-Hudson, West Des Plaines, Wisconsin, Fort Wayne, Indiana, Malton, Massachusetts, and Stratford, Connecticut. When King was 11, his family moved to Durham, Maine, where his mother cared for her parents until their deaths. After that, she became a caregiver in a local residential facility for the mentally challenged. Yes. Now, King says he started writing when he was about 6 or 7, just copying panels out of comic books and then making up my own stories. Film was also a major influence. I loved the movies from the start, so when I started to write, I had a tendency to write in images because that's what I knew all at the time. Now, King recalled showing his mother a story copied out of a comic book. She responded, "I bet you can do better. Write one of your own." He recalls an immense feeling of possibility at the idea, as if I had been ushered into a vast building filled with closed doors and had been given the key to open any I liked. King was a voracious reader in his youth. I read everything from Nancy Drew to Psycho. My favorite was A Shrinking Man by Richard Matheson. I was 8 when I found that, and of course Matheson was a big collaborator with Rod Serling for The Twilight Zone. King also asked a bookmobile driver, "Do you have any stories about how kids really are?" She gave him Lord of the Flies. It proved formative. It was, so far as I can remember, the first book with hands, strong ones that reached out of the pages and seized me by the throat. It said to me, "This is just not entertainment, it's life or death." To me, Lord of the Flies has always represented what novels are for, why they are indispensable. Now, when he attended Durham Elementary School, eventually entered Lisbon High School in Lisbon Falls, Maine, in 1962. He contributed to Dave's Rag, the newspaper his brother printed with a mimeograph machine, and later sold stories to his friends. His first independently published story was I Was a Teenage Grave Robber, serialized over 4 issues of the fanzine Comics Review in 1965. He was also a sports reporter for Lisbon's Weekly Enterprise. Now, in 1966, King entered the University of Maine at Orono on a scholarship. While there, he wrote for the student newspaper, the Maine campus, and he found mentors in the professors Edward Holmes and Burton Hatlin. Now, if you've ever been to Orono, the spirit of Stephen King is all around that community because that was his formative years. Now, King did participate in a writing workshop organized by Hatlin, where he fell in love with Tabitha Spruce. King graduated in 1970 with a Bachelor of Arts in English, and his daughter Naomi Rachel was born that year. King and Spruce wed in 1971. King paid tribute to Hatlin. "Bert was the greatest English teacher I ever had. It was he who first showed me the way to the pool, which he called the language pool, the Mitt pool, where we all go down to drink." This was 1968. I have trod the path that leads there often in the years since, and I can think of no better place to spend one's days. The water is still sweet, and the fish still swim. Now, his first professional short story was A Glass Floor, that was published in Startling Mystery Stories in 1967. After graduating from the University of Maine, he earned a certificate to teach high school, but was unable to find a teaching post immediately. He sold short stories to magazines like Cavalier. Many of these stories were first republished in Night Shift in 1978. In 1971, King was hired as an English teacher at Hampton Academy in Hampton, Maine. He continued to contribute short stories to magazines and worked on ideas for novels, including the anti-war novel Sword in the Darkness, still unpublished. Now, King recalls the origin of his debut novel, Carrie. Two unrelated ideas, adolescent cruelty and telekinesis, came together. It began as a short story intended for Cavalier. King eventually tossed the first 3 pages in the trash, but his wife Tabitha recovered them, saying she wanted to know what happened next. He followed her advice and expanded into a novel. She told him, "You've got something here. I really think you do." Per The Guardian, Carrie is the story of Carrie White, a high school student with latent and then as the novel progresses, developing telekinetic powers. It's brutal in places, affecting in others. Carrie's relationship with her almost hysterically religious mother being a particularly damaged one, and gory and even more. The review of Carrie in the New York Times noted that King does more than tell a story. He is a school teacher himself, and he gets into Carrie's minds as well as the minds of her classmates. Now, King was teaching Dracula to high school students and wondered what would happen if old world vampires came to a small New England town. This was the germ of Salem's Lot, which King called Peyton Place meets Dracula. That's a pretty cool reference. Now, King's mother died from uterine cancer around the time Salem's Lot was published. After his mother's passing, Kenny's family moved to Boulder, Colorado. He paid a visit to Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, which provided the basis for The Shining, about an alcoholic writer and his family taking care of a hotel for the winter. Now, when he returned to Auburn, Maine in 1975, he completed A Stand, apocalyptic novel about a pandemic and its aftermaths. King recalls that it was the novel that took him the longest to write, and it was also one of my longtime readers still seemed to like best. In 1977, the Kings, with the addition of Owen Phillip, their third and youngest child, traveled briefly to England. They returned to Maine that fall, and King began teaching creative writing at the University of Maine. Now, the courses he taught on horror provide the basis for his first nonfiction book, Danse Macabre. In 1979, he published The Dead Zone, about an ordinary man gifted with second sight. It was the first of his novels to take place in Castle Rock, Maine. He later reflected that with The Dead Zone, I really hit my stride. So from then on, like I said, really, really humble beginnings. But when Stephen King really broke, it was because of the movie and the book adaptations brought him to another level. Now, I really believe that he is the greatest writer in U.S. history, and that's saying a lot. And it's kind of weird how it goes. Now, Tabitha Spruce, talk about her a little bit, very motivated for the family. She's also a novelist and also a philanthropist. They own and divide her time now between 3 houses, one in Bangor, one in Lovell, Maine, and for the winter in a waterfront mansion located off the Gulf of Mexico in Sarasota, Florida. King's home in Bangor has been described as an unofficial tourist attraction, and as of 2019, the couple plan to convert the facility housing his archives at a writer's retreat. Again, he has 3 children. His daughter Naomi is a Unitarian Universal Church minister in Plantation, Florida, with their partner Thandika. Both of King's songs are authors. Owen King published his first collection of stories, We're All in This Together, in 2005. And Joseph King, who writes as Joe Hill, published the first collection of short stories, 20th Century Ghosts, in 2005. Now, the idea, ladies and gentlemen, all of this could have ended, and we're going to go to this just a little bit. He had a very severe car accident in 1999 when he was a pedestrian. Brian Edwin Smith was distracted by an unrestrained dog, struck King, who landed depression in the ground about 14 feet from the pavement of Route 5 in Lovell. Early reports at the time from Oxford County Sheriff Deputy Matt Baker claimed King was hit from behind, and some witnesses said the driver was not speeding, reckless, or drinking. Now, again, we're lucky to still have him. That was a really, really extremely, extremely dangerous situation. So we all have to start somewhere. I'll give you an example. Bev Vincent and I shared the same high school, Dalhousie Regional High School, which was known at the time from the early 1970s to the early 1980s to be one of the most creative, high schools in the province. They had a good theater program, Upstage 71. We had a good professor by the name of Mike Lushington, who was also taught drama. Most of the people would be treated to Theatre New Brunswick. I remember one incident where Barry Morris and David Adams Richards, our great New Brunswick author, visited to give a kind of a writing class or a class of a creative writing. It was a school that bred creative writers in every way. Actors have come from there, performers, Curtis Sullivan, Marshall Button, famous Lucien of Comedy Fair in New Brunswick, Candy Palmer, God bless her soul, the late great diva that was one of the best Aboriginal narrators, media members, and TV hosts of all time. And that's just in the course of about a decade. So when Stephen King started off, he was influenced by his family, but he was surrounded by creativity. And just like Bev and me and Candy and Curtis and all the Marshall and all the great performers from DRHS were surrounded by creative means. You have to have creativity in your background to reach your goals. But Stephen King, by the age of 70, knew what he wanted to do. I knew I wanted to be an entertainment and sports reporter by the age of 10, and like him, I read voraciously. I soaked in pulp comics, comic books, fiction. But you look at Bev Vincent, you look at Stephen King and people like them, they're much better writers than I'll ever even attempt to be. But the fact is, they come from humble beginnings, and that's what makes them good writers. Stephen King knows where he came from. He's never been a person to put on airs, never been a person to say, "Oh, I'm from parts of Maine that is backward" and stuff like that. He has elevated the East Coast writing community to such a level that you can't mention East Coast writings now before we say Connecticut and New Hampshire and Massachusetts, whatever, Rhode Island. Everybody talks about East Coast writing, or say Canada, the States. He's the king. He's the master, and like the king of horror. That's. But he's not exactly a king. He's a Pollock. I learned that a few years ago because there's been a lot of Pollocks I've either went to school with or known or covered as a journalist, and it's pretty amazing. So that's the early years of Stephen King. Please check out Bev Vincent's autobiography of Stephen King, both the what I call the adult version, not the adult version, and then the youth version, which is quite interesting, if you can find it, because it's hot on the shelves. And if you want to buy copies of Bev's book to donate to your local library or university, which you're glad to do, I know Bev would appreciate that, and Stephen would appreciate that. I've never met Stephen King, but all I can say, I remember when my family was doing book reports after I graduated high school, and Richard Bachman's name came up, which is Nom de Plume, the other Nom de Plume to Stephen King, I think was Running Man. He has had a big influence on New Brunswick literary community, because a lot of people write horror and a lot of people enjoy horror. And, there was a world before Stephen King, but I can't remember what it was like. In the early 1970s, nobody knew who Stephen King was. Stephen King didn't know who Stephen King was. And all of a sudden, instant sensation, like the world needed Stephen King, like a beautiful lady needs, a great, doesn't need makeup, if that makes any sense. He has created something that makes us, every time he writes or does something, it reminds us of the good of the best of literature, the best of horror, the best of suspense, best of science fiction. I remember going to see The Dead Zone at the Paramount Theatre in Campbellton in 1983, and my friend in French was saying about the movie, he said, "Jeffrey, was there ever a time, I can't remember a time that Stephen King didn't exist. It's like he was one of us, because everybody in New Brunswick likes people from Maine. Stephen King is the king of Maine as well, and tremendous." So this podcast is dedicated not only to Bev Vincent, to all the fans of Stephen King, and Stephen King himself. I hope down the road I will get to meet him, but I will say 2 words with all honesty. I don't even have to say anything else. Thank you. Enough said. Have a good one, and don't forget, if you like what we're doing with our Stephen King podcast, we did something on grandma with the new Twilight Zone just recently. Check that out. Let us know when to like, comment, subscribe, or share.